Well, hello, and welcome again to the 2012fad.com. I will be your host for this evening, and my name is Charlie Bluehawk. Last night, we talked about the zombie effect, which is mind control. Again, it doesn't really matter what you call it. You can call it social engineering. In the mid-1960s, it was the Manchurian Candidate effect. So Manchurian Candidate, social engineering, mind control. For us simple souls, it's the zombie effect. And I related to you a story, I told you a tale, about going to a bar, a restaurant bar, family place in New Zealand called the Southern Cross in Wellington. A European friend of mine had dragged me to this place, and I tried to explain to him it just wasn't worth the effort. It really wasn't. I didn't want to go. But he insisted. He says, Charlie, people need to know what you know. Come on, this is important. And at the Southern Cross, they had little event nights. I knew the Southern Cross from salsa dancing. So we'd go there, and they had a relatively nice little floor, and we would salsa dance. So that's how I knew the Southern Cross. And so I humored my European friend. I said, sure, whatever, just shut up. And so he dragged me there, and they were doing a screening of a movie called Zeitgeist, which is a very good movie about our master. It's a little dated now. They've upped the level of the atrocities they're committing. Stuff that our masters were hiding in fear 20 years ago. Stuff that they were terrified that we would find out 20 years ago. They're bragging about today. They're actually up on camera and literally prancing on CNN, Fox, the BBC, World News, all of their official mouthpieces. So, the level of atrocities they're committing against us is just, off the scale. But I said, fine, I'll go with you, whatever. So we went to the Southern Cross, and there was a screening of the movie Zeitgeist. And I think there were 50 people, maybe 40, maybe 60. We'll say 50. And after the screening of this movie, the fellow who had arranged it, and God bless his soul, he was trying. He didn't know what to say, and he opened the floor up to discussions, and I was standing to the left of the audience, a little partition, and my friend was standing to the left of me. And I started talking. I said, this movie's very accurate. I just came from the States. This is happening today, and if you're not careful, it's going to happen to New Zealand. And I thought my friend, who is not a timid fella, I thought he was going to scream like a little girl. I really did. I mean, his eyes bugged out of his head, and I thought he was just going to scream in terror. And I frankly don't blame him, because if I had been a normal human being, I probably would have screamed like a little girl too. And what terrified him so was that the 50 people, these 50 New Zealanders, who were sitting watching this movie Zeitgeist, all of them swiveled their heads to look at me, or more precisely to look where the sound of my voice was, because they never actually did look at me. But they swung their heads to the left to follow the sound of my voice. And each of them, all 50 of them, swung their heads at exactly the same time, at exactly the same angle, with exactly the same look on their faces, as if their faces had been painted on to their heads. No expression, no emotion, no conscious awareness, nothing. They were 50 puppets on the same string, and they all sort of swung their heads slowly over in my direction. This is the point where my friend looked like he was going to scream like a little girl. And the fact that he didn't, I look back now and I'm very, very impressed by that. He had never seen anything like that before. To me, it was just another day. I figured I'm there, okay, I'll continue talking. Maybe somebody will hear me, but I knew better. And again, I have to admit, I was very impressed by this fellow for not screaming out like a little girl, because this was a scene out of a zombie movie. This was what mind control is. It's what social engineering is. You're programmed when you hear certain words or certain phrases or certain combination of words, your brain, your higher consciousness, your rational mind turns off. And this is what happened to these 50 people. And the moment I stopped talking, 50 puppets on the same string, their heads at the same time, at the same angle, again with no emotion at all, no conscious awareness of anything. Their heads swung forward and looked straight ahead again. And I don't remember what happened after that. I think my friend grabbed me and dragged me out. And he was terrified. To me, it was just another day. And so I eventually fled New Zealand because I was so tired of trying to deal with reality with people who were, well, zombified like this. And my very first experience getting off the boat, as it were, in Europe was experiencing, I don't think it was mind control, I think it was just pure hatred. I actually met my soulmate in Europe, just as the old witch who had sent me to Europe told me I would. I meet this old witch every couple of years, and she shows up and barks orders at me and then ends with, "Don't do it, don't be stupid." But she'd actually shown up in New Zealand and was polite about it. Says, "No, you should go to Prague. They have these two buildings there they call, let's see, Fred and Ginger. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, a very famous duo back from the 30s, 40s, and 50s in movies. They were wonderful dancers." And so she was telling me this story about Fred and Ginger, two buildings on the main river in Prague. And she told me how much they loved Americans and how much, moving forward in the IT business, and they needed desperately high-end professionals, and they loved to hire Americans. I said, okay. My plan was to go to Buenos Aires, and I guess I was lucky that I didn't. What really convinced me to go to Europe is the old witch told me that I would meet the true loves of my life, and I would finally have my true job. That's all I wanted, was a job and a couple of pretty girls. I wasn't looking for anything else. And as with all successful lies, you have to tell a lot of truth to sell the lie. So 98% true story to sell the 2% of the story that isn't true, which is the lie. I did, in fact, meet the true loves of my life. I did, in fact, meet my soulmate. Problem was the old witch didn't bother to tell me that they would hate me to the core of their being and would rape the soul out of my body every single night because it was fun. Now, my rational mind knows they did this because they enjoyed it. My rational mind knows that the more they could hurt me, the more enjoyable it was for them. Whereas my emotional mind, to this day, more than a year later, keeps going back. A couple of times a day it'll happen. If I'm not careful, my emotional mind will say, how could anybody do that? Well, my rational mind knows the answer, because they enjoyed it, because they could. My rational mind knows they were doing that to men before I got here. My rational mind knows that they're doing it to men now that they kicked me out in the street and left me to die. My emotional mind can't accept that. And it's that break between the rational mind, where we logically know what's happening because we can see it with our own two eyes, and our emotional mind, which is our buffer against such horrors. That's where, if you can break the two, that's where our masters know is the soft point. That's where you go in and you do the programming. But you have to shatter the mind first, separate it into pieces, and then insert the programming in between the various pieces. The hope is that when you shatter the mind and the person hears these various keywords or key phrases or groups of words, various parts of your shattered mind will take over. In the case of these 50 people at the Southern Cross in Wellington in New Zealand, after viewing Zeitgeist, Zeitgeist probably hit them with every word they had been programmed to ignore. Which is when I started talking, they weren't reacting to me at all. They didn't hear anything I said because the movie had already shut down their higher brain function. I guess this gets me to the point where I guess I need to say that rage is everywhere, because what I saw in New Zealand, when you do mind control at this level, when you're controlling the minds of so many people, you program so many people, people know that there's something wrong, even when they're programmed. And rage builds up. I mean, rage. Rage like I'd never seen before in my life. I saw in New Zealand, and I'm from Los Angeles. I'm from New York. I know what I thought was rage. What I saw in New Zealand was gibbering madness. In New Zealand, if somebody asks you something and you tell them the truth, I had never seen gibbering madness before. This is a pure, pre-programmed terror of anything real. And when I say gibbering madness, what I mean is this is a fear of the truth that is so deep, and it engages so much rage that these people, first of all, you've made an enemy for life, and you're not sure how that happened because they asked you a question, you told them the truth, which you would think would be normal. But the gibbering madness is a fear, which then becomes terror, which then becomes rage. The gibbering madness means that they will destroy you at any cost, which means they'll destroy themselves. They'll destroy their company. They'll destroy their families. They'll destroy their country just to get even with you because you answered a question, honestly. So the zombie effect, mind control, the simplest way to describe this is you break the heart, you kill the spirit, you control the mind. We once chatted about, how do you defeat a great warrior? A guy, 7, 8 feet tall with a sword comes into your village and starts slaughtering everybody. And you can't possibly stand up to this guy physically. So what do? You send out the prettiest girl. She makes love to him. Immediately, he's controlled by her. And then she breaks his heart. Break the heart, kill the spirit, control the mind. And as my soulmate and her girlfriend, her lover, raped the soul out of my body every night and then laughed about it the next day, to my face, mind you. Again, there was that split of the rational mind that knows the answer. Why would they do that? How could anybody do that? The emotional mind asks. Rational mind says, because they could. Because they enjoyed it. Because it was fun. And of course, social engineering that our masters use on us, there's a lot of religion in this because religion is, quote unquote, man-made. God did not create religion. The devil did not create religion. It's a tool to control you and me. And it doesn't matter if it's a religion, politics, or government. They're beautiful lies. And all of us would prefer a beautiful lie over an ugly truth. The beautiful lie is what the politician says. The ugly truth is what our mind doesn't want us to see. I mean, even as our homes are destroyed in front of our eyes, our jobs are pulled out from under our feet, and we're dumped into the street, we're still desperately clinging to the beautiful lie. Because the ugly truth we can't believe. And it's into that battle for us, for our lives, that splits the rational mind from the emotional mind. You break that, we lose. Religion talks about faith and hope, which are the two great horrors of the human race. Don't have hope. Have a plan. If you lose hope, it breaks your heart, kills your spirit. Don't have hope. Have a plan. Hey, a plan changes. Okay, I can live with that. It's just a plan. Religion and government want us to have faith in what they tell us. Faith means that we're supposed to believe something that we don't see, we can't hold in our hands. We're supposed to have faith that they know what they're doing, whether it's a politician or a priest. We have to have faith in what they tell us, even as they're robbing and raping us. Break the heart, kill the spirit, control the mind. The zombie effect. But there has to be at a certain level in you and I where this can actually work, and obviously it does. So I know for a fact that my soulmate and her girlfriend, her lover, are not under any kind of mind control. I know that. Our masters don't have any kind of real control in countries where English is not the primary language. So why did they hurt me? They could have simply ignored me. That would have been okay with me. But they led me on, they fed me lies, and then they drop me into the dirt. Then they picked me up and did it all over again. That's hatred. Pure and simple. Has nothing to do with our masters. Every day, human beings turn on each other for no other reason than we can. We hurt each other just because we can, because it's fun. It's fun to do it to somebody else. It's not fun when it happens to you, and I've seen people who get what they deserve up close and personal. And they're dropping down on their knees and sobbing and wailing to their God, "Oh, dear God, why have you done these terrible things to me? I'm so good." And the rest of us in the room are looking at her going, "Who the hell are you talking about?" Because she had, robbed all of us and cheated and lied to all of us. And here she is, she's praying to her God, wondering why these terrible things had happened to her. Well, that's the thing. It happened to her. Instead of her hurting other people, all of a sudden she got what was coming to her. And it's not pretty. So how, if we do this to each other, how do we have the right to turn to our masters and say, "Treat us nice"? Where our masters can clearly see how we naturally treat each other, and we treat each other badly, especially in English language countries. After I got over the shock, and it took me about 6 months to get over meeting my soulmate, her girlfriend, her lover, and knowing they were just hurting me because it was fun, I started meeting real people in Europe. And pretty much, with one glaring exception, they've been lovely. Because apparently farther away you get from the English language, the more human people are. So I've been meeting human beings now. And that's really nice. But still, there's this natural tendency of human beings to be cruel to each other, to be mean. Why? Because apparently it's fun. So how can we demand that our masters treat us better when they see that we don't treat each other very well? It also gets to the point where our masters have been torturing and raping and brutalizing their own children for at least the last 8,000 years, making their own children hate them. And you and I now know about quantum entanglement. You become that which you hate. And so our masters not only torture and rape and brutalize their own children, making them hate them, the masters can now make their children become them. And so the great work, they call it, can continue. So again, it's unreasonable for us to demand or beg or plead that our masters treat us well when they don't even treat their own children well, when we don't even treat each other well. It's unreasonable for us to think that we deserve or we're going to be treated well. It's madness. And so tonight I thought we might chat about when God tells you to kill. The first thought that came to my mind, something I've suspected for quite a while, but couldn't put into the words, but the truth of the matter is, our universe is much different than we think it is. Now, we know that our universe exists inside of a bubble, because finally, Western scientists have admitted that our universe exists inside of a bubble. And I don't mean this to be condescending or belittling. I worked for NASA for 5 years with astronomers, and they became family. And I saw the anger and the desperation and just the resignation in these folks, and a lot of drinking, that they couldn't tell the truth because the people who issued them their paychecks told them what they could think and what they could say and what they couldn't say. I could occasionally get an honest answer out of an astronomer if I promised not to repeat it. And I occasionally would ask questions like, well, why are we looking at the distant universe when the moon is right there and the moon's a lot more interesting? That's a different story. I asked another astronomer, I kept hearing about all these asteroids coming towards us and we're going to miss us by 500 miles, and then they disappeared. And I said to a friend of mine, do we have any telescopes or anything that will show us where these asteroids were, or are they coming? And he said, no, there isn't anything. We got nothing. He said, just don't tell anybody I told you. But the truth of the matter is, when Western scientists are allowed by our masters to speak out loud about such things, it's because you and I have been talking about these very same things for 20 years. And it's not their faults. It's basically like going to Costco and standing in line at Costco on a Sunday morning in a line at the cash register behind 100 families who've stocked up for the month on food, and you've got one item. That's a Western scientist. They're at the back of the line. And they can't do anything because they got to check out. So when I say that Western scientists have finally, been allowed to admit this, it's not because I have anything against them or I think they're bad people. I feel sorry for them because as a scientist, there's only certain places you can work, and that's for the government. So Western scientists have finally been allowed to say that our universe exists inside of a bubble. Western scientists have finally been allowed to say that there are 10 dimensions existing inside of this universe inside of a soap bubble. That's easy to explain. Each of those dimensions exists because they vibrate at a different frequency. It's like radio waves and you're in your car and you're driving to work. If you set your radio at 101.1 on your FM radio dial, you can listen to country western. On the way home that night, you set your radio at 101.2 on the FM radio dial, and you're listening to classic rock. Now, both those sets of radio waves exist in exactly the same time and exactly the same space. And the reason they can exist in the same time and in the same space is because they vibrate slightly differently. They exist at different frequencies. So you and I are having this conversation 10 different places at the same time, in the same space. But because each of those dimensions has a slightly different frequency, there could be billions of dimensions in the exact same time and exact same space. Plenty of room for everybody because they're at a different frequency. Now, Western scientists, forgive me for saying it again, Western scientists have finally been able to state that 97% of the universe they can't find, but they know it's making energy, and they don't know where the energy is going. That means that stars are constantly exploding all around us. It means that entire galaxies are exploding in a chain reaction as these stars die. They take the next star with them, which takes the next star with it, and it's an avalanche. And eventually enough stars explode in a galaxy, the galaxy explodes. Then what? Well, it sounds to me like you and I, living inside of this universe, which is inside of a soap bubble, is an electrical generator. And it makes sense at a certain point, electrical generator, that microscopic particles, in our case our sun, because the universe is kind of big, our sun will eventually explode. It's basically generating electricity. That's what generators do. They blow things up at some level. And in this case, it would be, you and me. This gets us to the point of who made the universe. Well, some people call her, he, she, it, God. But if somebody, whomever, and please, I don't know religion, I'm just using the word God as a descriptive word that you and I will immediately both understand. Could be anybody. It could be a laboratory experiment of a graduate student, and we're all inside of a glass jar, and she and her girlfriend are seeing what it is like to create a universe, which apparently isn't that hard, because in our world, in our time, we know that the universe is electrical. And some electrical engineering guy built a sphere, sucked out all the air, put in some carbon and an electrical charge, and he created a galaxy. Spontaneously created itself. He didn't do much. He just gave it the opportunity. He created a galaxy inside of a little small, basically a jar. Energy arranged itself into the form of a galaxy. I've got to look that one up. I read about that and I've lost it since then. So we know it's possible. We know that's how sort of energy forms. So somebody must have gone to some trouble to design our universe that way, which means they made you and me. I would imagine that would take some small amount of effort. So if God, the computer, whomever or whatever, made us, why do you suppose God would then order us to kill each other if she went to all that trouble to make us in the first place? I mean, God, by definition, whatever, is our mother or our father or our central processing unit. Why would God, after making children, you and me, order her own children to kill each other? I mean, God, by definition, is either a really big computer or someone fairly advanced whose vibration, whose frequency is so high above you and me that she could be anywhere in the universe at the same time and do anything. I mean, can't God do her own killing? So when you're commanded by your God, through her local representatives, because, God cannot speak to you directly, so God apparently has to speak to your rabbi, your priest, your governor, your prime minister, or your president. And so God supposedly speaks through these people and orders you to go to the other side of the world and kill human beings who you don't know, you've never met, you've probably never heard of. What would your first thought be? I mean, well, since we seem to behave like little children all the time, we hurt each other just because it's fun. And our masters see that we enjoy hurting each other, so it must be fun. So they take that, predisposition of ours to hurt each other and put a God told me to do it, so it must be right behind it. And so we go off and we kill people we've never met because God, through her representatives, told us to. Well, they wouldn't lie about something like that, would they? I mean, God spoke to them. We should probably listen. That, of course, is the attitude of a very small child. You and I have been on this earth for 2.5 billion years. I'm guessing we should probably grow up now. You see, under the Constitution of the Constitutional Republic of the nation called the United States of America, it states that all citizens of that nation, and I'm not talking about the privately owned offshore corporation called United States Incorporated. I am not an employee of United States Incorporated. I'm not. I am a citizen of the United States of America. We'll talk about the difference of that again someday. Under the original Constitution of the Constitutional Republic of the nation of the United States of America, you have a duty to protect your country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. So you can take that one of two ways. You can take that God has spoken to your president, and your president has ordered you to go to the other side of the world and kill people who are no threat to you, who have never harmed you, and probably have no intention of bothering you. But your God, through your president, has ordered you to go and kill people in a different country. Well, God told him to do it, so it must be true. You can take that same document, the Constitution of the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America, not the corporation called United States, Inc. You can take the Constitution and it says you are required as a U.S. citizen to protect your country from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and look at the president and say, prove it. Call God into the room, let's have coffee. I want to hear it from her, that she spoke to you and told you to tell me to go kill people I've never met and who mean me no harm. I would like to meet God personally. Can you arrange that for me? And if he can't, I'm guessing that he needs to be arrested, because that's what we call murder. So let's look at the mysterious ways of how God works according to our masters. Well, if you look at our history, we have 8,000 years of written history, considering we've been on this planet, you and I, for 2.5 billion years. That's billion with a B. We don't really know much about ourselves. We only know the last 8,000 years. But from what we can tell from the last 8,000 years, it all started with God and her priests. God spoke to the high priests, who then spoke God's word to the people, you and me. Well, apparently you had to be a priest to talk to God. So to be a priest, you had to conduct yourself, apparently, in certain ways that God approved of. And if you look at the very old texts from Sumeria, I personally don't speak ancient Sumerian, so I'm really having to count on people I do not know to translate these things into a language I do understand, and I only speak two languages, English and bad English, and not really that well. So I have to count on other people, which I really detest, but it's all I can do right now. Originally, it wasn't God, singular. It was gods, plural. And gods, plural, said we should remake man in our own image. Not that we're making man, that we should remake man in our image. Okay, that's fair. So God remade you and me. And you had to know how to talk to God. You had to know how to approach God or the gods. You knew what to say, what not to say. In New Zealand, I learned that the New Zealanders are easily frightened. So I learned not to have big hand gestures. I learned to sit very still with my hands in my lap. I learned not to speak very loudly. I learned all kinds of things. There's a certain way you can talk to New Zealand Mandarin class. They're the servants, whoever the masters in New Zealand are, who control the country. There's certain ways you have to be in order to speak with them or to be in their presence. And never dress too well. That frightens them. So these priests had to know how to dress. They had to know how to behave in order to speak to the gods who had remade you and me. And then the priests would go and pass it along to the rest of us. We were fairly certain that gods at that time existed because they had temples and things, and the priests would go in and very dignified and solemn, and they would come out like terrified little children. So we figured something had happened. As time passed, there were more of us, and these priests became the first kings because only a king or a priest could talk to a god. Well, eventually we had to rebrand because kings became unpopular. It's like when corporations today become so unpopular, they just can no longer do business under their old name. For me, the one I remember I grew up with in Southern California was General Telephone and Electric, GTE. Unbelievably bad service, but you couldn't get rid of them if you lived in certain areas. It got so bad, GTE wouldn't actually improve their services, of course. They rebranded, and they became a company called Verizon. They could no longer do business as GTE because their history, their name was bad. So it's the same with kings. You couldn't be a king anymore because it had a bad connotations. Kings hurt people because it was fun. So eventually kings became prime ministers. Prime ministers, again, got a bad reputation because they were monsters and psychopaths and butchers. So prime ministers became presidents. And in order to talk to the gods, again, you needed to know the rules. And most people could not have even begun to understand what are the rules when you talk to the gods. So it was more easy for this knowledge, this arcane wisdom, this magic, to be passed down through families. Because if your dad and your mom went to talk to the gods on a daily basis, you got used to the idea that they talked to the gods, and you saw how they behaved, and you emulated, quite naturally, your mom and your pop. This is where I think the mystery schools, or those places, those clubs, those organizations, have kept this secret knowledge from event to event, from generation to generation. It got condensed down to these few families who knew how to speak to the gods. You just, they were either speaking to God or they were sitting in a room alone talking to themselves. Let's not even go there. In ancient Greece, women used to, priestesses would inhale fumes from volcanoes, and the gods theoretically spoke through them, and the kings would go and consult them. But that took a lot of time. So, again, priests became gods, priests who served the gods. Priests became kings. Kings had to rebrand, became prime ministers. Prime ministers had to rebrand, became presidents. And for some reason, the gods who remade you and I are very shy. They won't just come, they won't come out and have coffee with us. They won't meet us down at the bar and have a beer. They apparently don't come out for parades. And they never come to, family picnics. They never just hang out with us, the gang. Gods are very particular, apparently, of who they talk to. They're always in the shadows. They're always in secret. And the gods only choose to very select few that they'll talk to. Very few. And because they all came from the same families, they know the proper rites and rituals and ways to be polite to the gods. You and me, well, we're cattle. And quite honestly, we really don't want to take responsibility for anything. We don't want to take responsibility for our own lives. And we're very happy, for some reason, to let God's messenger on earth, in this case, our masters, the finger puppets that they control, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Cheney, Rice, Bernanke, Brown, we're very happy, always, to give away control of our very existence to these, priests, kings, prime ministers, presidents, who claim that they speak for God, or the gods. Now, the thing that really gets me, of course, and again, New Zealand was a wonderful learning experience for me. I had every fantasy I had ever had about the human condition ripped and torn out of my body. I personally cannot listen to any of these messengers of God because they frankly don't lie very well. I mean, if they at least pretended that they were telling us the truth, that, of course, would help. But see, they know they're lying. And they don't care if you know they're lying or not. They know you're not going to question it. So instead of at least trying to put on a good show, put on a good act, at least pretend to sell the lie, they're just smirking. Just watch them talk on TV, but turn the sound down and just look at their faces. Because they know that you and I, as good cattle, will believe anything they tell us, because Lord knows we don't want to take responsibility for our own lives. We'll just roll over and play dead. Even as they're robbing us, raping us, gutting us, and tossing us out of our homes into the street to die. Again, New Zealand, wonderful learning experience for me. I spent most of my time there in shock. Of the 3 years I was there, I think I spent at least 6 months sitting in my little room alone in the dark crying, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And then I started asking questions. And now I understand what New Zealand really is and how useful it is for things that I never dreamed of. But in New Zealand, what passes for the Mandarin class will do the same thing. They'll look you right in the face and they will tell the most amazing lies. And what's really insulting, what's really offensive, is not the fact that they're lying to you. Is the fact that they're not even trying to pretend that they are not lying to you. They don't even bother to put on a show. And I spoke to many, many foreigners in New Zealand. I mean, I had hundreds of foreigners who were friends there, high-end professionals, very intelligent, except for the fact that we were in New Zealand, very intelligent people who had exactly the same experience. their New Zealand managers, the Mandarin class of New Zealand, would lie to them right to their face and not even try to make it sound true. And it was actually more insulting than the lie itself, because they knew you'd listen and you'd be forced to believe it because you had no choice. But they didn't even make an effort to try. And that gets us back to the American and British mandarins, our masters. Thankfully, you and I will never actually meet our masters, and frankly, I don't want to. But I see the same effect that I saw in New Zealand. You can see it too. Just as, again, whenever they're talking on TV, just watch the interview on the television, but turn the sound down and just watch their faces. And it's really amazing. You can see several things, at least I can. They are terrified of us. They remember the French Revolution of 1789, I think, where just folk, the cattle, rose up and started cutting off their heads. And one of the mandarins even told me that his people lived in fear on a daily basis, that we would do that again. We would rise up and cut off their heads because we outnumber them 10 million to 1. So they're terrified of us. But at the same time, as part of their religion, and it is a religion, it's black magic ritual, it's the worship of Satan, doesn't matter if you believe in Satan or not. They do. Doesn't matter if you believe in God or not. They do. Our masters are actually more religious than you and I because they don't believe God exists. They know that she exists. And that's terrifying. Because of who they worship, they like to belittle and degrade us at every possible moment. And they always tell us in advance what they're going to do to us. They never give us the blunt, gory detail, but they'll tell us in advance. It's part of their religion. And they like to shove it into our faces and watch us gag because they think it's funny. And because they know we'll do nothing. We'll say nothing. And then God tells you to kill. But, she always tells us to kill through one of these specially elected servants, because they're the only people that God speaks to. And since their words came from God or the gods, you and I have to obey. Why? Because I can't figure it out. Because if God made us in her image, she must have been asking questions before she made you, me, the universe, whatever. She had to have been asking questions like in who, what, where, when, how, and why. And if we were made in her image, shouldn't we be asking questions? The word why comes to mind. You want us to kill people. Why? Because I keep asking questions, because I would like to know why. Why do you want us to kill anybody? Again, let's assume God exists and she made us in her own image. I mean, doesn't that mean that she can hear us when we talk to her? I mean, why do all these religious people go into churches and cathedrals and synagogues and temples and pray if she can't hear us? So if God is listening, and I get back to the fact that God, made the universe, and God can be everywhere at the same time, not because of religion, but because of science, it means she's either at a very, very high frequency above you and I, or she's so big, you and I couldn't possibly comprehend her. Either way, we couldn't figure her out, because you and I are way too far down on the totem pole. And if you and I, again, by definition, create the universe with our thoughts, and God lives inside the universe with us, that means that you and I are part of God's living body. And it seems unlikely, God, I'm imagining she's fairly busy, it seems unlikely that God would take the time to sit down and have a chat with the individual cells of her own body. I suppose you can imagine yourself sitting down. I mean, you are made in God's image. Let's say you sit down, have a cup of coffee, and you try talking to an individual cell in your own body. But you'd actually have to hurry because the cells in your own body only live for 7 years, and then they die, and they're replaced with new cells. So you gotta speed this up. So if you do talk to a cell in your own body, what would you talk about? The truth of the matter is, you really don't have anything in common with an individual cell in your own body. It is true, your cell is a part of you. And it's true that you exist because you are made up of millions, billions of individual cells, each doing its own little job. So you are the same, yet you're different. You are a part of God, and yet you are separate from God. So, okay, now imagine that you are God. At least you are God, the God of your own cells. Now imagine, for whatever reason, you order the cells of your right arm to attack and kill the cells of your left arm. That would be kind of silly, wouldn't it? Here you are, you're God. You just commanded your right arm to attack and to kill your left arm. Let's think about that. What would you, as God, or the God of your own cells, of your own body, what would you gain by commanding your right arm to attack and to kill your left arm? Wouldn't that result in some really horrible problems? Your right arm attacks your left arm, and I'm guessing that your left arm will fight back. And I'm guessing, since they're both part of you, that they're fairly equally matched. And this is going to be a battle in which neither side is going to win, but that both sides are going to lose. So if God, up there, tells you to kill other human beings, and you and I and those other human beings are part of God's body, wouldn't everyone lose? Because you and I, simply because we think, we generate electrical energy. We think and we create the universe around us. So if we start killing each other, wouldn't the universe suffer? Wouldn't God suffer? What's to gain from a battle of God fighting herself? Now, our masters know the answer to that. The answer is quite simple. It's just that we're not asking any questions. It's very simple. The God that you and I think of as, male, female, or a computer program, who made us in her image, she didn't say anything. But her girlfriend, her ex-lover, who she created, Satan, Lucifer, Yahweh, she'd win because she wants to humiliate and degrade her former lover, her girlfriend, her mother, her creator. And again, it doesn't matter if you believe in God or if you believe in the devil. It doesn't matter. Our masters believe it. The truth of the matter is that you and I live inside of a closed system. Our universe is inside of a soap bubble. And inside of the soap bubble are billions and billions of galaxies that we can't even see. And each of those galaxies is made up of stars. And around those stars, just like in the atoms of your body, around those stars orbit planets. And on those planets are people like you and me. And you and I make up a living machine on this earth itself. So we live inside of a soap bubble. And if God exists, she's in here with us somewhere at a frequency so high, you and I couldn't possibly imagine it. Her atoms are vibrating so fast, you and I could never talk to her, let alone understand her. And I doubt it's really likely that she would give an order to one part of her body to attack and kill another part of her own body. Which means when a president or a priest or a rabbi or a prime minister or a king tells you to kill human beings, people you don't know, you have nothing against, who've never harmed you, and frankly have no interest in harming you anyway. If your president, your priest, your rabbi, your prime minister, or your king tells you that God Almighty has sent a message to you to kill other people, I'm guessing that they must be lying. Now, of course, why would anyone want to lie to you and to me about killing innocent people? Well, because it's the only way they can get us to do it. To kill for no reason. Right now, Americans are killing for no reason in Libya. We've been killing for no reason in Iraq for years. Right now, Americans are killing in Pakistan and Afghanistan for no reason, right now. So why would God order her right hand to attack and kill her left hand? She wouldn't. That would be stupid. That would also be unkind. Only a fool attacks themselves. Only an idiot does it twice. And only the dead have no opinion. May you live as long as you wish. May you love as long as you live. For the 2012fad.com, this is Charlie Bluehawk. The 2012 Fad is brought to you by Coffee and Blood, Love Letters Between the Dead, a series of 5 erotica horror novels about a fallen angel finding his way back to regain his own soul, and how the CIA war against the human race, their black magic, captures and traps him in the body of a mind-controlled slave designed to hunt down and to kill their god, their Satan.